with you?
Hi, are you there?
Is anyone there? Because
Did you gather
yeah,
in our virtual room?
yeah, because they've changed the formats.
Facebook is changing things.
Yeah.
Anyone who works with Facebook will be shocked.
Someone's
they're
there.
They're
Good.
starting to.
Yeah, we had quite a shock before.
We
showed up and you was gone.
It's been a while since we've had technical issues on the gathering.
I know, but it was definitely something in the interwebs.
Yeah.
Anyway, hi, Marianne and Rachel.
Hi.
And Sarah.
Hi.
Yay, it's so good to
Nice
see
to
everybody.
see you guys.
Janice and Dee Dee.
Oh my gosh.
And Cindy.
They're
Everybody's
coming.
here.
Thanks
How
for
you
gathering. Come
Nice to see
in.
you,
Have a
Robin.
seat. Get comfortable.
Yes, have coffee. Have
Yes, help yourself to a beverage and a snack.
Yes, and cough syrup and
Sure.
Yeah.
Not too much coffee syrup.
and
take
some
it easy.
chalky soil in case you're low on calcium. We have all things here for you.
Wow.
You just-
I've left Marty in charge of the beverages this week, clearly, and the snacks.
Favorite snack of the party is chalky soil.
Anyway, how's your week been?
Right?
Tell us everything.
Everything. We want to know.
Were there any endings? Were there any beginnings?
Mm.
This is the theme.
Have you ever seen Lust for Life, the movie? No. It's not about Leonardo da Vinci. It's the one about Michelangelo. The Thing.
I somehow
Based
haven't.
on the novel. And the Pope is always going in as Michelangelo is painting.
Is that called The Agony and the Ecstasy?
Yes, The Agony and the Ecstasy is painting the Sistine Chapel, and there are all these nude bodies everywhere, and the Pope keeps coming in, and it's overscheduled. So he keeps saying, "When will you make an end?" And I thought, he's making ends all over the ceiling. Yeah. I was 10 when I thought of that joke.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
fine.
You'd think I would have thought of something better, but no.
Sistine Chapel, good work.
Yeah, you
Good
could do
job.
worse. So, yeah, today I decided to talk about endings and beginnings because I am finishing a book, and I've been talking about this for weeks, but today I'm literally, like, it's due tomorrow at my publisher, and I'm typing away, getting it all gussied up and tidy. It's been through a couple of edits, and yeah. So I thought, well, I'm feeling kind of bittersweet because I actually have loved this book. It's been a really good friend to me, and I've loved playing with it every day. And now it goes to play with someone else for a while. It'll be back though. It'll be back,
come back.
dressed in
It's
marketing
like
clothes.
Cemetery.
It is, and when it comes back, it is not what
The
you want to
same.
see.
They don't come back the same.
Not
I'm gonna just me to turn into zombies like that.
If you do not know the plot of Pet Sematary, you won't know that, but it's funny. Trust
Everyone
us.
knows that. Everyone knows that.
Oh.
I'll go and give you
I
a
wanna
false
talk.
ending so you can talk.
I want to talk about endings and beginnings.
Let's do it.
Let's make it end. Okay, so I was thinking about endings because everything eventually ends, right? And I was remembering when a woman called me when I had just heard that my son had trisomy 21. I was still pregnant. I was about 22 weeks pregnant, and I was not pleased to discover that he had this extra chromosome. And this woman, who was the mother of a similar person with the same diagnosis, called me, and she said, this is not the end, and it's not the beginning. And I don't remember who she was, but ma'am, if you're out there, I deeply appreciated your love and concern, and I thought you were full of crap. Because I thought, yeah, it is the ending, and it is the beginning. It's the ending of my image of my life as I was going to live it, and the fantasy that I would have children that would be absolutely perfect in every way and grow up to make everyone proud and compensate for my own complete decrepitude. It was the end of that, and it was the beginning of a very different life. I made a completely different life. I wouldn't be here right now if it weren't for that event. So at the time, I was grieving mightily, but I felt like, no, it is the end of something that I really wanted to happen, and it's the beginning of something I do not yet know. And to tell me it's not the end and not the beginning, even though it was based in love, was just not true. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that every single moment of our lives can be seen as an ending and a beginning. the truth of impermanence, the first noble truth of Buddhism, is that everything's always changing. So sometimes they're obviously changing. Like you get sick, you get a bad diagnosis, you lose a loved one or whatever, and things change radically, and you can't avoid it. But then there are the times when things seem to be going along just fine. In the coaching system that I teach, my Wayfinder coaches, there's a motto for the times that everything seems stable. And the motto that you have to remember is, everything is changing, and that's okay. The motto for when things are definitely changing is, I don't understand anything that's going on, and that's okay. So I wanted to talk about this concept of endings and beginnings, because the very call from that woman showed me she was trying to spare me from the agony of having to acknowledge endings and beginnings. And that's because our culture doesn't like to acknowledge them. We want to somehow stay in the illusion that things can stretch out in stasis for indefinite periods of time, that will never grow old, that will never have any losses, that, nothing is really changing in, I don't know, the climate or the culture or whatever it is, when all around us there's evidence of continuous change. Now, there are other cultures that don't run away from the idea of endings and beginnings. And I've talked to you about one recently when I mentioned one of my new favorite books, In Love with the World by Yongey Mingyur Rinpoche. He's a Tibetan Lama, and the Tibetans teach their kids from the cradle to think about impermanence and inconstancy as the stuff of everyday life. So he talks about getting your kid a toy and saying, here's a toy, but it will eventually break and disintegrate. That's okay. It's impermanent. Everything is. And I was like, how dare you say that to a child? I was reading this book on a plane, and I was coming back from Africa. And this monk is talking about being trained from the cradle to think about his own death. And I was thinking, that's pretty severe. And to cheer myself up, I looked around the plane cabin at this beautiful young family from England who were coming over to Philadelphia. And there was a mother, a father, and two little girls, this gorgeous 1-year-old and then a beautiful 4-year-old who looked like Alice in Wonderland. And I was reading this book about death and impermanence, and I thought, I'm just going to focus on the vibrancy of new young life, because that's what Americans are all about. And I got talking to the family and with the mother, and I finally said, why are you going to Philadelphia? And she said, it's because my 4-year-old here is dying of a terminal brain illness, and they want to study her. And it really rocked me back. And she was so amazing. She was like, oh, don't worry about it. It's a big thing to take on at first, but it's just part of life. We're all really dying, aren't we? I can't imagine what life must be like for someone who has to keep explaining this to strangers and comforting them for her loss. But she was like, it was this amazing family. And as I went from the book to the family to the book, I thought, something is trying to teach me about impermanence. I better pay attention. And what I learned was, from the book and from watching this family, was that to turn directly into the truth of endings and beginnings and to celebrate them instead of refusing to acknowledge them is the only way to be actually happy on this mortal journey through life. We're here for a heartbeat or so, and then boom, we're gone. And every little ending and beginning reminds us of that truth. And so we shy away. But as Mingyur Rinpoche says, he says, ignoring the little deaths and births of everyday life is like mistaking jewels for pebbles and throwing them away. He says that every small ending can be a precious jewel, and that we're meant to celebrate and enjoy them. So how does that work? We were talking about this, and I was reminiscing about a time when I went to a blessing ceremony with a family of people from the Dene tribe, or the Navajo as they're sometimes known. And I had asked that my ideas about how we should all get together and save the world be given a formal blessing by this medicine man. I didn't know when I did that I was calling an entire large group in together and taking days out of their schedule to create this blessing ritual. It was their generosity is unthinkable. And we all got together in the desert of Arizona, and all these beautiful people came together, and there was a grandmother sitting on a camp chair, and there were teenage boys putting up this huge teepee, and there were babies running around. And then they put up the teepee, we got into it, and we had this ceremony, which I thought would last the morning. Like 18 hours later, we were still in this teepee, and everyone there was in celebration of the exact moment that was passing with every heartbeat. Like, I was sitting among people who did not have the same drive to make use of time. We were sitting together, and we passed this literal jewel around. They had this huge crystal that they'd found somewhere, and they would pass it around, and each person who got to hold the jewel would celebrate something about that very moment, what was arising and what was passing away. And there were times when people wept, and there were times when people laughed, and it went on and on and on. And I was talking to Ro about it, and she said, I can just imagine looking back from my deathbed and saying, damn, I wish I'd spent more time sitting on the couch with my family. Like, why not just celebrate the fact that we're here in this precious moment, and that every single instant, every single experience is something sweet that will never come back again. Like, savor that. So I was thinking, how do you do that? How do you live in constant celebration of the endings and beginnings that are the impermanence of life? And I was looking back at traditional peoples, and one thing I saw is that they all have a different concept of what to do with their time. Sitting on the couch with your family is literally the most important thing you can do. Hunter-gatherer tribes worked an average, people estimate, anthropologists estimate, of 4 hours a week gathering food. The rest of the time they were hanging out together. Another thing that they all do is they have important rituals that mark passages, beginnings and endings. And Mario Martinez, the psychoneuroimmunologist / cultural anthropologist who studies people who live very long lives, like more than 110 years of healthy life, the thing he saw in all these people was savoring every moment, acknowledging endings and beginnings, and having beautiful rituals by which to mark the passage of time. In Tibetan culture, the monks create these beautiful, beautiful, intricate mandalas made of sand, and then they blow them away or brush them away with brushes, because the point they're making is that the creation of beauty is continuous. The falling away of everything organized, entropy, is continuous, and loving every moment of it is how to live a happy life. So these are the things I wanted to do, and I want to challenge you to do them too today. Think of something that is ending for you today, something you will never do again. I don't know if, like me, you look in the mirror every few days and go, wow, that eyebrow is never going back to brown. Or whatever it is, like, oh my goodness, I just noticed it's white, and it's, no matter what I do to it, it's always going to be white. It could be an ending as small as that. And allow yourself to feel that sort of bittersweet twinge that's never coming back, but it's a diamond. And the experience of it is a jewel that stays in your soul forever. The diamonds we gather from the births and deaths we live every moment are gathered within us to go with us wherever we end up in the next iteration. So think of something that's ending and feel the bittersweetness of it. Then think of something that's beginning. You don't even know what's beginning. The day that Adam was diagnosed, who knew that I'd be sitting here in the gathering room talking to you about spirituality when I was like headed on for a Harvard professorship in my wildest dreams, and would have been completely miserable. You don't know what's beginning today, but feel into it and imagine that it's something completely exquisite that you could never get unless you let go of what you have right now, right? Unless you brush away the things you've created, you can never create something new. So then when you've thought of something that's dying and something that's being born, I'd love you to have a ritual to celebrate that today. Like sit down and commemorate what's past. I'm going to sit down and say, damn, I loved writing that book. And gosh, I'm going to miss it. But who knows what's going to happen on the book tour? You know, I could meet anybody. Anything could happen. So I'm going to have, I don't know, a glass of wine. That's something we do in our family quite frequently. We don't all drink like fish, but Adam is very strongly in favor of having a daily, really good glass of wine. And he is also in favor of having it at exactly 5 o'clock, a time we call wine time, and having dinner at exactly 6 o'clock. And we always have to say grace, which is just the word grace. We all just say the word grace and we're done. And then we always have to go back to the couch and sit there and watch 2 episodes of a show that he likes while he and I cuddle together on the couch, as we've done since he was a tiny boy. So our family is filled with ritual because of the endings and the beginnings that I thought were going to be so awful. And I am here to tell you that is the thread, that is the interstitial tissue that brings all those jewels together in our hearts and minds. Give yourself a ritual today and then do it again tomorrow. Find something that ends and something that begins and celebrate it somehow. And the next day do the same thing, and the next day do the same thing, so that every single day we're honoring the deaths and the births that are continuously taking place as we make our way through this apparent mortal existence. So now I'd like to take some questions, please, after my big rant about endings and beginnings. Here comes the notorious Badger.
Here I am, coming crashing back into this reality.
I don't know what is ending for you. I don't know what is beginning for you, but I know it can be wonderful, even if it seems terrible.
A lot of people are sort of a little bit caught up, I think, on the how. Like, how do I celebrate something's going forever? I don't want to feel like every ending is a loss. You know, what do you to do to get there?
You know what you have to do? Sorry. You have to allow yourself to grieve. You have to let go a little bit. But when you may have experienced this, when you hold it at bay, when that woman said to me, this is not the end and this is not the beginning, it was like I was trying to hold the ocean back and the ocean wanted to come in. And the ocean said, your life is changing and you will be frightened and you'll be sad and you'll be angry. But if you allow all that to happen, you will find your way to something much more wonderful. So I've talked a lot on the gathering room about something that Mingyur Rinpoche also mentions. He says, you become an observing, compassionate presence that holds all those grief reactions within itself. So there's this wisdom, and here's the thing, it actually doesn't have endings and beginnings. It exists in eternity. It is outside of time. And so if you get very still, you can feel it as a presence that never changes and that's holding all the change within it. It's also true that, and this really helped me when I realized time isn't linear, and that once you get outside of time, all of time is laid out before you. I wonder if maybe we can access the plane of time from the plane of eternity and always connect with every experience we've ever had, even when we've gone past it. That feels inherently true to me.
Yeah, me too.
And so I believe we're racking up jewels is what we're doing with every little death. Every time we feel that emotional, the classic reaction to loss, which is first resistance, but then there's bargaining, anger, sadness, and acceptance, I think. Yeah, they don't put fear in there, but it's usually there as well. But as we hold that and we do it again and again and again, grieving the end of writing a book is not a big deal, but it's a little deal. And I can watch the whole thing go out. And as I treasure the whole experience of the presence of the book and the end of the writing and the loss and the sweetness of the sorrow, it goes into the treasure chest that I'm amassing by spending this time in this apparent body.
Yeah.
Why else are we here? We're here on a jewel hunt.
Oh, absolutely.
And the jewels go with us. Yeah.
That's perfect. Yeah. So you can have the presence of the book. You can have the presence of the writing of the book.
Yeah.
To visit.
And that's really interesting in traditional cultures, the freedom with which they allow the grieving process. And not all traditional cultures, but I've noticed it in many, many cultures that I've studied, this willingness to hold emotion in a state of presence that is bigger than the emotion. And that relies on a belief in the spirit. And our culture doesn't have that. So for us, the grieving process is like a horror.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that speaks to those of you who are asking about, but what if you don't want something to end that's ending? You know, it's
we don't.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. You have to lean into this, to the part of you that loves it so much. I mean, why? I remember giving a seminar and talking about this, and a woman saying, I do not like to be sad. I would not have signed up for this assignment, this mortal existence, knowing that I'd be sad. And for some reason, maybe it was inspiration, I said to this woman, what's your favorite movie? And she said, Ryan's Song. Ryan's Song is a movie about a football player who dies of cancer. It's a true story. And it's so sad that they actually show it to actors when they train them to cry on cue. They just say, remember Ryan's Song, you will cry. I said, how many times have you seen Ryan's Song? And she said, oh, maybe 20. And I was like, you say you don't want sadness. You don't want the grief of loss. And yet you are drawn inexorably to this incredibly powerful, sad story of loss. There's a sweetness in there that your spirit knows it can gain, even though your culture says, this is just a disaster. This must not be the end. This must not be the beginning. That's what our culture says. But the soul says, oh no, everything's a beginning and everything's an ending. And the one thing you can be sure of is that every ending is a beginning. One does not occur without the other. So whatever we let go of, if we resist, we still lose things, but we don't let good things be born. When we stop resisting and allow the in and out of the tides of life, then grief comes in and then a new birth happens. And there's this amazing world we never knew existed. We can be reborn with each loss we experience if we don't resist. And people say surrender to the experience. And the way you surrender to the experience is just to sit there and say, I am not going to resist what's happening to me right now. Maybe it's the end. Maybe it's the beginning. I'll just have to see. I'm not in control. It's both. It's always both. And when you realize that every end, when you accept it, gives way to a beautiful new beginning, even death ceases to be as frightening, even your own death.
So Sandy asks, what about when you feel stuck in limbo, so nothing seems to be ending or beginning?
Well, just, you know, get a plant and then don't water it. It will change. It will end. No, there are those times. And those are the times when I think we're sort of called to start creating. Because this process of continuous ending and beginning, my own theory, this is not in any way scientific, is that on the other side of every black hole in the universe is a Big Bang. You know, on a supermassive black hole, there's a supermassive Big Bang creating a new universe on the other side. If you can, I can't remember what I was talking about there.
I wasn't listening.
Oh God! Now that's what the Notorious Badger is for.
I'm reading comments.
You're reading comments?
Yeah.
Anyway.
You're on talking, I'm on reading.
Okay. Once you realize that, oh yeah, I remember, the creative process itself is constantly going in and bursting forth and going in and bursting forth, and that we're part of that our own experience goes into a black hole and comes out as this incredible blast of light and substance and being. When you realize that's not just something interesting, but that is your essential nature, there's a relaxation, and it's the relaxation we get from knowing something is true. You know, when you hear something true, your body and your heart relax. And knowing that you are continuously creating and recreating your whole life, that will settle you. That's what all those cultures are trying to teach us, I think. That will settle us down, not because it's good news, but because it's simply true. Everything's always ending. Everything's always beginning. Relax into that and we'll be fine.
Perfect. So I guess the ultimate extension of this is death. And Colette was asking about when there's a death of a parent, her husband's parent, I think, who, when there wasn't a traditional ceremony to mark the death, what's something that they might be able to create for themselves?
Well, I really suggest that you do whatever feels most precious to you, but if you can go into nature and connect with nature, it is very comfortable with the process of death and rebirth. You'll go out there and like if I went out into the forest outside my house right now, there are rotting logs, there is dead grass, there are dead leaves lying there, and they're all slowly being mulched. And then the crocuses are bursting up through the leaf litter, and the first little daffodils are starting to show their heads, and the little red buds on the end of every tree twig. It's still winter, and it's all ready to be born. It's all going, and you can see that the death of the organisms around you is giving birth to other organisms, and maybe it's the very same soul that's going into the dark and out into the light again and again. And it's the joy of that process that makes nature so magnificent to us. And we forget we're part of it. Our culture tears us away from all these concepts and makes us just want to hold this moment. There's no joy in that. There's no truth. So go into nature, find something that's dying and something that's being born, and grieve the loss and celebrate the gain. It's always happening all at once. Again, once we relax with that, we'll be fine.
I love this just idea of just the truth, because there's so much, reading through all the questions and everything, there's just so much of, but I don't want to, and I'm scared, and it's hard, and I'm consistently, coming up against endings.
Yeah, and the culture has not trained you to do that at all. So, I mean, read Tibetan Buddhism. It will help you a lot. But there's one phrase I wanted to finish with from the Tao Te Ching, my favorite Chinese book. And it goes like this: the master stays as calm at the end as at the beginning. So if you look out at a sunrise and you can watch it in calm, and then that very same day you watch the sunset and you can observe that with calm, you can see that there's an equal and parallel beauty that is always occurring. And again, if you can go into the presence of those moments, you'll start to move away from the culture we have, which tells us that endings are always catastrophic and beginnings are frightening. And you'll go in, you'll stop throwing away the diamonds of your life, mistaking them for pebbles. These things that they tell us to be afraid of are precious and beautiful. And all we have to do is say, okay, I won't resist. It's going to happen anyway. So surrender your resistance to the things that are passing away, passing away. And we could do that. We could finish with the surrender allow meditation. That's always a favorite of mine.
Yeah.
So here you go. Here's your ceremony for today. Here's the thing that's going to end, a breath. Here's the thing that's going to begin, the next breath. And with everyone, you simply don't resist what's happening. And that's how you create the space in which you can hold the endings and beginnings of a mortal existence, the spiritual space in which you can have a human experience. So on an out breath, you say, I surrender all resistance to things that are passing away right now, passing away. When you breathe in, you say, I allow the next breath to be born. I allow what is being born to be born. When you breathe out again, say, I surrender to this breath passing away. And then you say, I allow this breath to come in. I surrender to everything passing away as it is right now, doing what it's doing. I allow everything being born in the world to be born. I surrender my resistance. I allow. I surrender. I allow. And then you'll realize it is the ending. It is the beginning. But you are eternity. and nothing can ever harm that. So thank you for joining me on my ending beginning day, and I will see you next week, and so will the Notorious Badger on yet another gathering room.
This one ends, the next one begins.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
I guess it won't end.
The ending will not come.